For about 1 in 6 couples all over the world, the dream of having a family turns into a really long and challenging journey. It's a path that's just filled with science and hope, but also some pretty tough emotional moments. In this explainer, we're going to dive into the deeply personal world of infertility. We'll separate the facts from the fiction and look at all the different ways people can build their families today. Okay, so let's get on the same page with a clear medical definition. What are we actually talking about? Well, clinically, infertility is defined as not being able to conceive after 2 or more years of regular, unprotected sex. Now, that 2-year mark is pretty important. It's the benchmark that helps doctors figure out if a couple is just taking a little longer than average or if there might be something else going on that's worth looking into. And it's so important to understand just how common this is. We're not talking about some rare condition here. This is a reality for millions and millions of couples all across the globe. And in a country like India, it's a huge issue that affects so many lives, and it often comes with this heavy weight of social pressure and emotional stress. Okay, now that we know just how widespread this is, it is absolutely critical to cut through all the misinformation that's out there. So let's get into one of the most important parts of this whole topic, busting some common myths and getting straight to the medical facts. This slide right here, it gets to the heart of a really painful and persistent stigma. In so many cultures, and definitely in parts of India, the blame for not having children gets placed almost entirely on the woman, and the impact of that can be just devastating. But the medical reality, it couldn't be clearer. Infertility is a couple's issue. The problem can be with the male partner, the female partner, or a lot of the time, it's actually a mix of factors from both. So what are these factors we're talking about? Well, as you can see, the causes are incredibly diverse. They can be physical, like a blocked tube. They can be congenital, which just means something you're born with. Diseases play a massive role. Things like PCOS are really common. Certain drugs, like for chemotherapy, can have an impact. There are even immunological causes, where the body might actually fight off sperm. And you know what? We can't forget psychological factors. Really high levels of stress and anxiety can totally mess with the hormones you need to conceive. So for a couple trying to figure all this out, with this whole web of possible causes, where do you even begin to look for answers? Well, in this next section, we're going to walk through that path of discovery, the modern process of diagnosis and treatment that can lead to parenthood. The first step is almost always a specialized infertility clinic. And these places aren't just your typical doctor's office. They're like these advanced medical detective agencies designed to get to the root of the problem. They'll do everything from blood tests and sperm analysis to ultrasounds. And from there, they can offer treatments, which could be anything from fertility drugs to a surgical fix to even lifestyle advice. But what happens when those first-line treatments just aren't the solution? Well, that's when the journey moves into a whole new world, the world of assisted reproductive technology, or ART. And that's just a broad term for all the amazing procedures where science gives conception a direct helping hand, usually inside a lab. So let's see how this all builds into the truly fascinating field of ART. This is where science really steps in to create possibilities that just didn't exist a couple of generations ago. We're going to go inside the lab and see how these modern miracles actually happen. And this, of course, brings us to the most famous ART technique of them all, in vitro fertilization, or IVF. You've heard the phrase test tube baby, right? That became famous all the way back in 1978 with the birth of Louise Brown, the very first person ever conceived through IVF. It was an absolutely monumental moment in history that just opened up a new world of hope for millions. And this breaks down the process perfectly. First up, you have gamete collection. That's retrieving the eggs and preparing a sperm sample. Step 2 is fertilization, which happens in the lab in a super controlled environment. In step 3, the embryologists watch the little embryos for a few days to make sure they're developing healthily. And finally, step 4, the healthiest embryo gets carefully transferred back into the uterus. Now, that last step, the transfer, actually has a couple of different flavors. With ZIFT, a really early stage embryo is placed in the fallopian tube. The idea is to kind of mimic what happens naturally. But IUT is way more common today. That's where a more developed embryo goes directly into the uterus, which often gives it a better shot at implanting successfully. But hey, IVF isn't the only tool in the ART toolbox. There's GIFT, which is similar, but fertilization happens inside the body. Then there's ICSI, which is an incredible procedure for severe male infertility, where a single, healthy sperm is injected right into an egg. And there's artificial insemination, or AI, which helps when natural insemination is a problem. It can be a pretty straightforward procedure or a more advanced one called IUI, which gives the sperm a shortcut to get closer to the egg. But while the science here is truly amazing, it's not a magic wand. And that's really only half the story. Now we need to talk about the other side of this, the very real-world challenges, the emotional and financial hurdles that so many couples run into on this journey. So here's the deal. These high-tech solutions have some serious practical limits. The cost alone is a massive barrier. A single cycle of IVF can cost thousands of dollars, and there's no guarantee it'll work, which means people often go through multiple cycles. And the emotional toll, it's just an intense roller coaster. In a place like India, these clinics are mostly in a few big cities, so they're hard to get to for a lot of people. And then you layer on social and religious factors, and it just adds another level of stress to the whole thing. So when that high-tech route isn't the right one, whether it's because of the cost or success rates or just personal choice, what's next? It's so important to remember that the goal here is parenthood, and keeping that in mind opens the door to a different kind of miracle, another deeply meaningful way to build a family. And in India, the legal framework provides a really clear and regulated path for adoption. The whole process is designed to make sure the child is safe and cared for. It involves things like registering with an agency, doing a home study, and then a legal process to make that child a permanent part of the family. It's a structured journey that connects loving parents with so many children who need a home. And I love this powerful quote, which comes from the medical and social analysis we're looking at. By calling adoption not a last resort, but one of the best methods to achieve parenthood, it totally reframes the conversation. It validates adoption as a primary, beautiful, and incredibly fulfilling choice for building a family. So we'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. As science keeps pushing the limits of what's possible, the challenge for us as a society becomes pretty clear. So what do you think? As we look to the future, how can we make sure that all paths to parenthood, whether it's through the latest tech or through the timeless act of adoption, are truly accessible, affordable, and emotionally supported for everyone who wants to build a family?